Okay, so let's start creating our custom component based on a JavaScript library, an external JavaScript library. And we will create a Tooltip component based on Popper and Tippy.js. So Tippy.js is the library and Popper is a dependency of that library, Tippy.js. So Tippy.js is a library that creates tooltips, and it has a lot of cool features. So you have placement. It's very similar to the tooltip that OutSystems UI also has. So these placements, we can customize the arrows. There's something here that I like a lot, which is the interactivity. So for example, sometimes we need to place a button or something inside the tooltip, and this allows, so I will be able to place a link here and click on that, or a button or wherever. So if I say that it's interactive, it will allow me to do this. If it's not interactive, it will disappear automatically, okay? Like you can see here. So this is the non-interactive, which is the default case of the tooltip. But if I want it to be interactive, I can. So this is just a parameter that we will be able to customize. Again, using the tooltip from OutSystems UI, it's perfectly okay. But if you want the extra mile, if you want some behaviors, some additional behaviors, you can create the custom one, which we will be doing now. This is a page I will be using for the demo. This is a sample screen that you create out of the box with OutSystems. And in Service Studio, I already have that screen here. Okay, first thing, usually the patterns do not stay on the same module where the screens are built. Usually we create libraries for that. So if you have a component that's agnostic to business logic and is shared amongst several screens, several modules, we create libraries for that. And another standard practice is that we rename, we add a suffix to the module, like _pat, or we can call patterns, well, we can call whichever we want, but it's a best practice to say that components pat, or I can call front-end tips as well, _pat, and for patterns, and it's a library. The main difference between a library and a reactive web app is that the library, as you can see here, doesn't have the processes. So it has interface, it can have logic, and it can have data, usually for static entities, but the main difference is that it doesn't have the processes tab. Okay, but it's a library. Okay, let's start. Let's create a flow here. We'll call it patterns. I will add a block. I'll call it my tooltip. Okay. Okay, so this will be my block. I will say that this is public in order to be shared to other modules. Okay, it's public. It's in the path, and first thing I need to do is, okay, so this is my library. First thing I need to do is fetch the JavaScript from the library. So I have it here. I will fetch this. So this is the JavaScript that I need. Okay. I just copy. I'll go back. I will add a script here, create script. I just copied the JavaScript from the Popper. Yeah, that's correct. So I will call this Popper. And this is the JavaScript. So one of the things I usually do for reference is in the description I add a version. So this way I know which version of the library I'm adding here. So it's a good practice to have this, because well, versions might change, and the description gives me that information. And I will create for the Tippy as well. So Tippy. I fetch from here. Oh, this is the development. Let me get to the production one. Let me get the production one from Popper. Okay. And now I will get the production one from Tippy. Okay, copy. Here I will add the code. Okay, so which version is this? 637. I will add this in the description as well. So we have the Popper and we have Tippy, and we will say that these two scripts are a dependency on this block. Okay, let me publish this. I'll go to this module and so I have this. I will add the dependency. Okay, frontend tips path, and I have the module here. I'll just play a bit. I'll just place it here. I will publish. Okay, I'll go to the browser. I can, oh, where's the mouse? I can like this, refresh. So the block should be here, although it's empty. Of course, we know it's empty, but it's here. Patterns, my tooltip, so that the block is here. And since the scripts were a dependency of this, the scripts should be here as well, should be loaded here as well. Let me check. Okay, oh, here it is. So Tippy and Popper, these two. So these are the scripts that we just downloaded, added to the block, and since they are a dependency, they are already being loaded here. Okay, let's go. So let's start creating the component. So this is my tooltip. What we need at least two placeholders, one for the trigger and one for the content. So let's add them here. So this will be the trigger and this will be the content. So the trigger is where we will interact, the content is, well, the placeholder that we will display. Usually I prefer always to have a container around everything. So this container will hold everything in my component. I would call this, so it's already called my tooltip. I will style it my tooltip. So this is the CSS class that I will use later. And the trigger will be this. Oh, I hate when the AI of Service Studio does this. Why does it put the content? God damn it. Yeah. Okay, so my tooltip content, my tooltip trigger, and the wrapper is my tooltip. So just this, let's publish. I will refresh the dependency. Publish as well. Oh, let me add some content here. So on the trigger, And on the content, I will place some text. Yeah, big one, yeah. Okay, let me publish this. Refresh. Okay, so this is my content at the moment. Now, let's see what we need from the library. So Tippy, my button, content, my tooltip. So this is the basic usage of this component. So I'll copy this. Let me go to the component and let's see how I can use this in here. Okay, so my tooltip on ready. And why on ready and not on render or initialize? Or so ready is when everything is already rendered on the screen, the IDs are already rendered. Initialize, I still don't have access to the IDs of some elements. On ready, those are already rendered and designed on the screen. So usually we use the on ready. I will put a JavaScript node here. And on the JavaScript node, so this is the code that I need. So this will be the ID of the trigger, and this will be the content. Okay. The ID of the trigger. Let's start with the trigger. So it already has a naming, so it generated an ID automatically. Let's use it here. I'll add an input parameter, trigger ID. I'll add the content ID as well. Okay. So the trigger ID, yeah, this will be the trigger ID, and it's this ID. The content ID will be this one. Okay. And here, so this trigger ID will be this ID here. The ID of the container identified with that class, my tooltip trigger, because that's the class I wrote before. This ID will be this value, b2 hyphen trigger dash b2 dash content for the content one. So I will do something like this. This trigger equals trigger ID. Okay. And I will use this. Let me just publish. Refresh. And it's working. So when I hover this container, which is this container, it automatically displays my tooltip. Let's go back. So this is the trigger and the content is my tooltip. So next step is, instead of displaying this my tooltip, I want to display whatever I have in the content. Let's clean this up a bit. So content. So in here, I can just do the same, document get element by ID and content ID. But this is an object. And besides the content, this will receive a few more configurations. So let's see. So for example, allow HTML, or well, let's go called props. There is a lot of things that might come up on that. So for example, the interactive that I mentioned, interactive. So by default is false, but we can set it to true. So I'll play a bit, I will use this. Interactive true. So, but instead of having the object here, because it will grow a lot, let's create something. Let's create config. This will be a JavaScript object. I will place these two properties, and here I will use the config options. Yeah, something like that. Config options. Okay. Interactive true, and instead of using my tooltip, I can use something like document get element by ID, and this will be the content ID. Okay, trigger, config options, and here Tippy trigger config options. This Tippy is a global function that's available in my browser, in my window, because I loaded the Tippy script, which we have here, Tippy script. So Tippy is available. If I go to the console and write Tippy, this is available because I'm loading this. And writing Tippy or window.tippy, it's the same thing. But this will already work. Let's see. Publish. And since I have the interactive true, you will see that the tooltip does not disappear when I hover out. I'll refresh. Okay, so you see, so now I can interact because I have the interactive true. If I move out, it disappears. I can place a button here and it will interact. So if I want to change this, false, I always need to refresh when I change the code, refreshing the consumer module. I will refresh here as well. Now I set interactive to false. And if I try to interact with it, I cannot. So one of the things is the placement. So why is it coming on that position? Because it's in the middle and it's affecting the whole container, and it's in the center of the container. And why is it coming down? It's coming down because by default it goes up, but it doesn't have space, so it does not go outside of the screen, so it automatically flips down. So if I change a bit here, if I change this and I move it elsewhere, I move it here, refresh, so by default it goes up, but in that case it didn't have the available space to be displayed on top and automatically flips down. And this also works for the left and the right. So imagine you have a tooltip here and you'd say it open to the right. It doesn't have the room available, and it automatically mirrors and opens to the left. So that's automatic. So, but this is the trigger and it goes up. So this is already very useful stuff. Let me just place it again. I'll put it here on the breadcrumbs. Yeah, I think it's better here. Okay, so more stuff. One of the things that usually we do in these components is we had a lot of properties. We have a lot of properties, and those properties should be customizable. Well, it makes sense. So it doesn't make sense that the interactive is always false. Sometimes I want it false, sometimes I want it true. And besides the interactive, there is a lot of properties, all props, that, well, sometimes we need to customize. One of the things, for example, it's the trigger. Does it trigger? By default, it's mouse enter and focus. Focus for keyboard navigation, for example, but it's mouse enter. But sometimes I want it click. So trigger is something that should be customizable and we should change as we need. So trigger is one. I will add here trigger just for reference, and by default it's mouse enter and focus. So leaving it blank or like this, mouse enter focus, it's the same. This is the default, and the order by which the properties come, it doesn't matter. So it can be whatever order you wish. Trigger. There are many, but I'll just try to pick some that are very interesting. So the trigger, one of the things that I want to change is the placement. The placement, yes, of course. The placement. So the default is stop. Placement. The default is stop. You can leave the last comma or not. It's up to you. But usually, sometimes I clean it, but it can stay there. Placement by default is stop, and that's why it shows up top. And horizontally, it doesn't have anything, so it's center. So by default is top center, but you can pretty much pick whatever. Okay. So how do we customize this? So usually we receive these properties, at least these three, because the content will be that content of the placeholder, but at least these three should be customizable: interactive, trigger, and placement. And usually how this is done is we have an input parameter of the block. Let's call it config, and in here we should have those three properties added in this config, and usually we use a structure for that. Structures. Add structure, my tooltip, config. So it will need to be public because the block which belongs to is also public. So what do we need? We need not the trigger, the placement. We need the placement. We needed also, what was it? Oh, the trigger, yes. Interactive. So placement is a string, trigger is a string, and interactive is a boolean. Interactive is a boolean, the placement is a string, and trigger is a string as well. So I'll just put just alphabetically, but the order again, it doesn't matter. So interactive, boolean, placement, and trigger. And the naming JSON, this is automatic. It will be trigger, it will be placement, it will be interactive, Yeah, so we can have the default values here, which are the same default values that we defined. Okay. I'll go here. The data type is the structure, these three properties, okay. So it's never used, of course, it's never used, okay. So in here, this is the onReady of my block, and well, I'm not using this, that's why I have this warning here. So let me use this. And so to use the structure in a node, a JavaScript node, I must use the JSON serialize. So what this does is, like it says here, converts an OutSystems structured data object into a JSON string. And the deserialize does exactly the opposite. So I will use the serialize here, and this will serialize the data that comes from this input parameter of the block, which is the config. And one thing it's asking me is serialize default values. I will say yes on this one, serialize default values, and what it does is bring the default values that I have here. So by default, interactive is false. The placement, the default, if I remember, the placement is stop. So it's a string, interactive is a boolean, is false, this is stop. And the trigger by default, all props, the trigger is, the default is mouse enter and focus. Trigger is mouse enter and focus. So these are the default values of these properties. So interactive is false, the placement top, and the trigger is mouse enter focus. I will have the default values, and in the serialize default values, yes. So if the user, the developer that uses this block doesn't set a value, it will automatically bring the default values. Here they are, default value. Okay, here it is. So the serialize, the output of this will be a string, and we will receive the string on this one. So I will add an input parameter, I call it config. It's text because it's a string. The information on that is the output of the serialize, okay? And just for debug, let's do something like this, console.log, and let me, okay, something like this, yeah. And publish. So I changed the public signature of this block, I added an input parameter. So I will need to manually update the dependencies. That's why we have this, because I changed something in the block. So it's an input parameter, but we need to automatically, manually update the references. Oh, it's mandatory. Yeah, because I said it was mandatory. Let me change that. Mandatory, no. It's not mandatory. That's why we have default values. So it's not mandatory. By default, if I don't do anything, it assumes the default values. So not mandatory. Okay, now it's not mandatory. And by default, it will assume the false, the placement will be top, and the trigger will be mouse enter and focus. Yeah. The plugin also has their own defaults, but I prefer to control everything on my side. So with this, I will publish. So I won't change anything. I want to see the console log first before proceeding. Okay, I will refresh. Look, so this is the console log that we have. Console log. So this is the console log that we wrote on the JavaScript node, right? So this is a string. So this is inside my JavaScript node. But can I use this directly in my JavaScript node? I can if I use something like JSON parse. Let's see what I'm talking about. And for me to use this string as a JavaScript object, I need to do something like this. So let me input configs JSON parse, and I will use this. So it's parsing that string and transforming it into a JavaScript object. JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So this is pure JavaScript, and it's an object that I can use in my configuration. So I will do this just for you to understand. No, yeah. I'll keep this and I will input config. So just for you to see the difference between one and the other. So no change in the public signature. I just need to refresh here. No need to manage dependencies. I will refresh. Okay, so this is the difference. So the first one is the string. It's the output of the serialize. I cannot do anything with this. But if I use JSON parse, now I have a full object, which I can use in my coding. So this is the difference. The serialize and deserialize is just a technique that OutSystems gives us, allows us to switch between high code, JavaScript high code, and the structure in OutSystems. Serialize, deserialize, just to transform. So this is what we can use in our code. And to use that, let's go back. So that is the string that we can use. So input configs dot interactive. So input configs dot interactive. And this is, let me check one thing. Oh, interactive is capital. Is capital because it comes capital as well. So this is the interactive that I'm looking for. Dot interactive, and the trigger and the placement. Here is the trigger. So interactive, trigger and placement, interactive, trigger and placement. So again, the order doesn't matter. In here, it automatically is in ascending order, but here, but doesn't matter. Okay. I will remove the consoles. So this is the string that's transformed into a JSON object. This is the trigger. So the config options, and this is where the magic happens. I will publish. Oh, one thing before publishing, let me create 2 instances. And let me copy here. Let me just display flags. flex one. Yeah. On this one. This is the one. Display flex, and on this one I'll just play this will be the flex one. Yeah, just this. So display flex, flex one. So this is the first tooltip, this is the second tooltip. So on this one, I will say the interactive, so by default is false. On this one, I will say true. And on this one, the placement will be top. And on this one, the placement it will be all props. Let me go to the placement. I'll say right and bottom end. So bottom end placement, bottom end. Yeah, let's test. So trigger, okay, and I cannot interact with it. Oh, I said top, but it doesn't have space, so it went down. And on this one, I can interact with it. But the placement, well, it depends on the content. Yeah, it depends on the content. So, but I already customized the interactive. This is interactive, I can click, and this is not. Oh. One of the things that I can change here is, this is the my tooltip. Yeah, I will customize a bit the CSS on this. Yeah, but it's already working. Let me just rephrase and redo everything. So we have onReady. On the onReady, we have a JavaScript node that accepts the trigger ID, the content ID, and the configuration object. The configuration object comes from this input parameter with 3 properties. And the way you can use those properties is using the serialize. The serialize transforms this into a string, a JavaScript string, and then you can use that in here. So this is what you've done at the moment. Now I'll customize a bit the CSS part. And the CSS here will be important because of the placement. So it's not clear visually how the placement works. So let's work a bit on the CSS. So I have Visual Studio Code here, and I already have set up the injection of the CSS in my browser window. So if you don't know how to do this, check my other video that explains in detail how we can inject CSS in real time and update the browser. So you can check the other video and we'll have that working in no time. So, okay, so this is the browser. Let me just put this a bit smaller. And this is Visual Studio Code. I will create here custom tooltip.css. So this is the CSS that will be injected here. What's the name of the class? I don't remember. So I call it my tooltip, right? So this is my tooltip. So my tooltip, this is the class that I named, and let me see, color red. Okay, let me activate this. The accelerate CSS is from the previous video. Custom tooltip, let me check if this works. Okay, it's working. Okay, so my tooltip, one thing is one border, solid tx blank. Yeah, so why do I have the border here? To see the placement of the tooltip. So it's in the middle because, yeah, by default we set the placement in the middle. Yeah, but the space that everything occupies is the full width. Let me change a bit that. If I display, okay, so if I change to inline flex, yeah, let's play a bit with the placement. Let's go back here. Okay, so this first tooltip, so the placement, the default is top. Oh, it tries to go top, but it doesn't have room. So, okay, I'll just make this smaller. If I make this smaller, it will have space available to be on the top. And on this one, I'll make this smaller as well. I will move from here. And the placement on this one is bottom end. Okay. Publish. I'll refresh. So it goes to the top, and this one goes to the bottom. So it tries to center. But the reason why the content is not centered is because it would be off screen. And so it detects that this is the end of the available area, so it doesn't go off screen. So that's why I love this. I'll change a bit the construction. I have a third place, so I'll remove this. So no, yeah, I'll add flex one on all of them. And I will add also a tooltip here, and on this one, bottom start, something like this. Okay. So bottom start. So notice here the tooltip, it's the start. So when you say start is the alignment of this. So if I say bottom end, this part will be aligned to this. So this is start. That's why it's aligned here, because we said bottom end. This is bottom start, and this is bottom centered. But it's not centered because it doesn't have space available. So this is done automatically, everything, the mirror, the top, the bottom, and everything. So, and I'll just go back to Visual Studio. So let's remove the border because the border doesn't make sense. No. Okay, now we have this. This is not interactive, this is interactive. Oh, I mentioned before the interactive thing. So if I have a link here, or a button, I can even have a button. Right action. Yeah, just call it dummy because it doesn't do anything. Yeah. So I can click on the button. So, and this is the reason why I use the same block for tooltips and the popover. So whenever the UX and the UI they want a popover, I usually use the same component for the tooltip. The only difference is that one is interactive and the other is not. Yeah. But what if I want to customize the tooltip itself, this balloon and whatever, the font, wherever. So we can do pretty straightforward. Let me just put this a bit bigger. Okay, so there's one thing that we should take into account. For example, they have something called theme. So the default is empty, so it doesn't have a theme, but we can add our custom theme to our custom tooltip, and you can have multiple themes wherever. Part of the business wants a green one, the light, the dark, the yellow, well, wherever. So we can add a theme. Let's do this. Let's change a bit our component. So let's go to the structure. Theme, is it mandatory? No, nothing is mandatory. By default is empty, so that's why, yeah, we will not place anything here. So theme, whenever the user creates one with theme, okay, it's being serialized here, and now I will add here as well. Theme, theme input, fix, theme. Okay, I will publish. So I added a new property, so I must refresh the dependency here. Publish. Oh, but I forgot one thing, because I want to see different themes. So let me say that this one, the theme, let me call something pretty. Yeah, I'll use pretty. Okay, so this one, the first one, everything is default. The second one has the bottom start here. Oh, the trigger here. Let me press, let me try click. Yeah, let me change this as well. So the default is mouse enter and focus. This one I will use click. And this one, it will be again mouse enter and focus on this one, bottom end, and I'll call it pretty. Okay. Refresh. So, oh, this one now is on click, if you remember. So I will click, it's a popover, and I can have buttons that interact. So it's pretty much the same component, but if it's not on hover, it's on click. So that's the reason why I use the same component for popovers and for tooltips. You can just change the styling. And this is the pretty one. Let me check the pretty stuff. So do you see the DOM being changed? So it generates in runtime the tooltip. And one of the things that I want to show you, let me see if I can. I can, okay. So here it is, data theme pretty. So once we have this, once we have the data theme pretty here, we can do pretty much everything with CSS. So we can use this data attribute to customize and to style our tooltip. So the rest is done automagically by the component, by the JavaScript library. But from here onwards, from here inside, we can change everything. So what do we know? We can have the component called tooltip, and we have the Tippy box here. So we can customize, we can use this Tippy box with that theme pretty. Let's try. Let's go to Visual Studio. So it was Tippy box, I think it was something like this. Pretty. Oh, this is CSS. Wait a minute. Sass. Remember? I always talk about Sass. If you saw the other video as well. Let me watch Sass. Okay, so I will write Sass here, and this will generate the CSS there. Okay, let me background color, I don't know, aqua, yeah, and color black, beige, brown, yeah. Just save. Let me see my tooltip. Not the theme pretty. Okay, here it is. Oh, I need to have the DevTools open for this to work. Well, I don't like it. Well, probably you don't, but this is just to explain the purpose of it. Now let's use something much better. I don't know. Okay, white and the color. Yeah, much better like this. Yeah, okay. So this is the black one and the pretty one. Okay. Oh, imagine we want to change that arrow as well. Let's do that, and let's make this a little more dark. Okay, yeah, it's much better. So how is that done? How are they doing that arrow thing? It's arrow, it's a before. So, okay, so the Tippy arrow and the before, this is the style that's being done by the component. We are not messing with the positioning and that, we're just messing with the color, just the CSS. So I guess there is a color, a border, something. Border bottom color, here it is. Border bottom color, it's initial because yeah, it's inheriting the color from somewhere. So I want this border bottom color to be white. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so border bottom color from the before in Tippy arrow. Tippy arrow, the before border bottom color, I want it to be the same as this one. Okay, yeah, it's done. I'll refresh just to make sure that everything is clean, but I don't need to refresh. Yeah, and here it is. So this is the pretty one. I can add shadows and wherever. So this is how we customize the CSS on the component. We can add a theme, and well, if I want to change this into the pretty as well. So I come here, the theme pretty. Done. So now it's a popover, white popover that's interactive. And that's it. So we added a JavaScript library, we created a component, we added a structure to customize the component, and we generated custom CSS, which is this. This is the custom CSS for us to customize the component with a theme called Pretty. Where should we put the CSS? Some of you might be asking. Well, you can put the CSS directly in the block. It's self-contained, can be shared, but you can also create a theme for your project and add all the CSS of the project, of all the components into that into that theme that's shared across your application. So it depends on the architecture. I'm not going into that in this. The purpose of this video is just how to pick a JavaScript library and how to transform it in a custom component in OutSystems. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We can do so much. The main thing here is that understand it's possible to pick JavaScript from the internet if the library is stable and is well maintained with tests and everything. So I only use libraries that are well maintained and well supported by the community. And usually if the OutSystems UI component doesn't deliver what you want, you can create a custom one on the side. But if things from OutSystems UI, if they work for you, well, perfect, carry on. But if they don't, if you feel the need to create something custom, so now you know it's possible, and it's quite simple as well. So for example, this, the Tooltip and Popover, for me it's the same thing. I can create everything from scratch in a few minutes. There are a few more things that we could talk about, but the video is already getting too long. For example, you can have events on create, on destroy, and hidden, on hide, and then trigger other stuff. You can control the component from client actions. You can open or close the tooltip with other interactions, something like, yeah, you press here and then that tooltip would open. So we can do a lot more, but my objective here is for the video to remain simple, and I guess it's already clear what's possible. So thank you for watching. See you next time.